December 4th, 1872, Wednesday. Around 1 p.m., at latitude 38 degrees 20 minutes north, longitude 17 degrees 15 minutes west, on the Atlantic Ocean, midway between Portugal and the Azores, John Johnson, the helmsman of the sailing ship Dei Gratia, spotted a strange shadow on the horizon. The vessel, drifting about 5 miles ahead, was a brigantine, a 2-masted ship. Her sails were set haphazardly, failing to catch the wind. She moved like a giant beast that had lost its will, repeating irregular, serpentine stumbles across the waves. Captain David Morehouse of the Dei Gratia instinctively sensed a distress situation. Yet, there was no response to his signals, no human silhouette on deck, and no voice crying out for help. At 3 p.m., Morehouse dispatched Chief Mate Oliver DeVoe and 2 others in a small boat. When they pulled alongside the Mary Celeste, they were met by an unnatural silence. The hull showed no major damage, with less than 3 feet of water in the hold. No physical cause could be found that would render the ship unseaworthy. But the moment they climbed onto the deck, they encountered a chilling, hollow space, as if human existence itself had been cleanly carved away. There should have been 10 lives aboard this ship. Captain Benjamin Briggs, a 37-year-old veteran. Beside him, his 30-year-old wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. Supporting them were 7 skilled crewmen: First Mate Albert Richardson, Second Mate Andrew Gilling, and Edward Head, the cook and steward. Rounding out the crew were 4 experienced German sailors, each a professional who knew the temper of the Atlantic intimately. On the table in the captain's cabin, a meal was laid out, as if someone had been there only moments ago. A child's clothes were neatly folded, and an open Bible rested there, preserving a record of ordinary peace. Valuables, personal belongings, and months of food and water remained exactly where they should be. Why would men who knew the sea, a father who lived to protect his family, abandon this safe ark? There were, however, 2 definitive absences. One was the ship's only lifeboat, which should have been secured at the stern. The other was every single navigational instrument, the sextant, the chronometer, save for the captain's log. The final entry in that log was dated November 25th, 9 days before the discovery. In the 216 hours between that entry and the ship's finding, within the deep mists of the Azores, what happened among those 10 people? This is not a story of the supernatural or the occult. It is the record of a tragic decision made by humans driven to the brink of terror, inside a vessel carrying a hidden bomb of 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol. The screams of 10 souls swallowed by the deep blue of the Atlantic, and the silence of the ship they left behind. We now begin to unravel the truth of this profound absence. When Oliver DeVoe, chief mate of the Dei Gratia, stepped onto the deck of the Mary Celeste, he was first enveloped by a loss of sound so profound it made his ears ache. The only sounds were the dry slap of slack ropes against the mast and the creaking of wood, like an old man's sigh, as the hull swayed with the waves. When she had sailed from New York on November 7th, 1872, this deck should have echoed with the shouts of lively sailors and the innocent laughter of young Sophia. Devoe moved cautiously toward the heart of the ship, the cabin. The door swung wide open, revealing the most inexplicable scene of the entire mystery. In the center of the cabin stood a table. There, a moment in time had been preserved, as if breakfast had been served only minutes ago. Half-eaten food remained on the plates. The tea in the cups had grown cold, a thin film forming on its surface. A pot sat still on the stove. A sudden, violent end to the ordinary. It was a discontinuity of time that proved they had no leisure to prepare for their escape. On the desk in the captain's quarters lay the logbook Benjamin Briggs had kept so faithfully. The final entry was dated November 25th at 8 a.m. Weather calm, sighted Santa Maria Island in the Azores. The handwriting was perfectly steady. There was not the slightest hint of the unrest or unease that must have permeated the ship. Yet, beside the logbook, where they should have been, the chronometer and sextant were nowhere to be found. For a man of the sea, to take these instruments means only one thing: abandoning the ship and casting oneself into the ocean with the resolve never to return. More puzzling still were the remnants of family scattered throughout the vessel. The sewing machine Sarah had used, and an unfinished piece of child's clothing. A wooden toy rolled across the floor. Illuminated by the sharp, slanting rays of the sun, these objects cruelly emphasized the absence of their owners. Devoe would later recall the scene, saying, "It was as if time itself had frozen." But as Devoe continued his search, he began to sense a discordance lurking beneath the silence. At first glance, it was a peaceful morning scene, but closer inspection revealed the marks of an inexplicable, sudden change. Some windows had been boarded up tight. The cover to the pump room lay wide open, and the moment the hatch to the hold was thrown back, a choking stench of alcohol struck Devoe's nostrils. A fathomless silence, and the heavy presence of alcohol fumes. In the winter of 1872, within the confined spaces of this ship, what terrified these 10 men and women? What drove them to the edge? As Devoe stepped into the darkness of the cargo hold, this mystery transformed from a simple disappearance into a story that questions the very depths of the human psyche. The moment Mate Devoe pried open the hatch, a scent drifted out, cutting through the cold sea breeze, sweet yet sharp enough to grate on the nerves, the smell of chemical vapor. Deep within the belly of the Mary Celeste, 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol lay stacked in heavy, oppressive silence. This cargo was the master key to the enigma, the invisible trigger that most likely claimed 10 lives. Later investigations would unearth a chilling physical reality hidden beneath the surface of this peaceful ghost ship. 9 of those barrels were found entirely empty. In that era, industrial alcohol was not sealed in steel, but held within the porous grain of red oak casks. On the long voyage toward Genoa, Italy, radical temperature shifts and the relentless churning of the Atlantic caused the spirits to vaporize, pooling a lethal, invisible gas at the very bottom of the hull. What happened when that unseen saturation reached its limit in the dark? One compelling hypothesis suggests a spark, perhaps a mere flicker of static, ignited a low-intensity explosion. Even if no blast occurred, the sheer force of the stench and gas erupting when the hatch was opened may have deceived Captain Briggs into a fatal miscalculation, the belief that a catastrophic explosion was imminent.
Here, the nature of the mystery shifts. Why would a seasoned mariner like Briggs abandon a sturdy vessel to cast his family into a fragile lifeboat? The answer lies in a single rope, trailing from the stern into the dark water. He had not truly abandoned the ship. His intent was to tether the lifeboat to the Mary Celeste, keeping his family at a safe distance until the danger of explosion passed. But the Atlantic is indifferent to human caution. A localized squall or a sudden violent shift in the current, recorded around November 25th, struck the tiny boat. The tether groaned under extreme tension, chafing against the hull until, finally, it snapped. The small, powerless boat was instantly swept into the maw of the winter sea, while the Mary Celeste, her sails still pregnant with the wind, surged forward into the void, unmanned and indifferent. Of course, the theories do not end there. The Vice Admiralty Court in Gibraltar relentlessly pursued darker leads: a conspiracy for insurance fraud by the De Gratia crew, or a bloody mutiny by the sailors. Yet the ship surrendered no evidence of struggle, no bloodstains, no marks of steel. Legendary tales of sea monsters and giant squids emerged, but they crumbled under the weight of scientific scrutiny. In the end, no hypothesis leads us to the one truth that matters: the bodies of the 10 souls. All that remains after the inquiry is a cruel contrast: a man's wrong decision made in a desperate attempt to save his family, and the irony of an unscathed, empty hull drifting mockingly through the fog.
(1873). The Vice Admiralty Court in Gibraltar eventually ended, leaving the mystery without a definitive conclusion. The recovered Mary Celeste was returned to the sea, but it was as if she carried a heavy curse upon her wooden bones. She was sold and resold, passed from one owner to the next, like a dark, unwanted secret. Yet no one could escape the misfortune she seemed to summon. Owners fell into ruin. Some met suspicious deaths mid-voyage, while her hull repeatedly ran aground, as if seeking its own end. 1885. 13 years after the enigma began, the Mary Celeste was steered for the last time toward the Rocheleau Reef off the coast of Haiti. It was a final, ignominious act. Her last captain ran her aground, conspiring to claim the insurance gold. But even then, the ship refused to vanish quietly. Her broken hull clung to the reef, exposing the evidence of fraud to the sun and the salt. As the relentless waves scoured her timbers and the wood eventually rotted away, the physical vessel that held history's greatest maritime mystery finally dissolved into the sea. The ship is gone, yet the shadows of the 10 who vanished remain etched upon the horizon. Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, and their young daughter Sophia. Not a single word, not a single trace of their fate has ever emerged from any corner of the world. When we map the Atlantic currents of that cold November, we find only a vast, indifferent expanse of water, a void that rejects all human hope. Perhaps, within days of their departure, they were claimed by hunger, thirst, or the crushing weight of the nocturnal waves, sinking slowly into the indigo deep. Modern science continues to offer its logical interpretations, slash the expansion of alcohol vapors or the sudden panic of a seaquake. Yet, no matter how precise the simulation, we cannot reach the truth of the heart, the screams that echoed on that deck, or the absolute despair that commanded the silence. History is often shaped not by the accumulation of proven facts, but by these unerasable voids that linger in our collective memory. The Mary Celeste, a record of that precise moment when a sturdy vessel of civilization collided with the overwhelming void of nature. When the fog finally cleared, nothing remained. Only a chair swaying silently with the swell, and a teacup that had lost its master. And yet, somewhere beyond the mist, the faint breath of those still reaching for an invisible rope continues to drift through time, as a legend that will never let us go.